All right, my name is Néstor David Pastor. I am working with the Philadelphia Latino Film Festival to put together this roundtable featuring LOLA Award nominees in the shorts category. So I'm joined by Christine Rodriguez, Shenny De Los Angeles, and Monica Moore-Suriyage. Thank you all for joining us. So I just want to do quick introductions. I'm going to put this in the chat, just if you want to go down the line, but please tell us your name, your pronouns, how you identify, where you are from or based, and a little bit about yourself and your film. So anybody want to go first?
I'm Monica. My pronouns are she, her. I identify as Afro-Latina and Sri Lankan, South Asian. My mom's from the Dominican Republic and my dad's from Sri Lanka. So a lot of cultural identities. I'm still figuring out how to define myself. I'm from Pennsylvania originally. I went to Temple in Philly, and now I'm based in Los Angeles. And my short film is called La Ciguapa Siempre. It was made as part of LOLIF's inaugural fellowship program last year, so the Los Angeles Latino Film Festival. And it was sponsored by them and Netflix. And it's a horror short film about a young girl finding out that she is one of the mythical Dominican creatures, La Ciguapa, which they are beautiful women who will kill you if you come across them in the woods with just the sound of their voice, and their feet face backwards so you can't follow them. So she's feeling very isolated and wondering where she belongs, and it turns out that she belongs in the woods.
Christine, do you want to go next?
Sure. I'm Christine Rodriguez, and my pronouns are she, her. How do I identify? Well, I identify as a mixed race, and culturally, I identify as Afro-Trinidadian from the Caribbean, English Caribbean. I have ancestors who are Afro-Latino, but I did not get to meet them, and the culture and the language were lost. Just from living under the British system in Trinidad. So yeah, I'm based in Montreal, and Fuego is my first short film. My background is more playwriting, but I did study screenwriting. So now I'm diving into that, and things are happening fast and furious. Fuego's just traveling to so many different places, and it's really exciting. Fuego came out of a program from an organization called Black Wealth Media, and they created a program in Montreal called Black Ink, where they wanted people who identify as Afro-descendant to create their short film, to get our voices out there. And so I opted for Fuego, a story about an Afro-Cuban man who's hit rock bottom in Montreal, because I'm studying Hispanic studies at university, and I was deploring the lack of Afro-Latino representation and a lot of the content in the films that we watch at school. And so I had some friends, Afro-Latino friends, so I decided to create this story and work with them to create Fuego. And thank you for having me today.
Of course. Shenny?
Hey everyone, I'm Shenny. I use she, they pronouns. I identify as Dominican American, biracial, mixed, Black, Afro-Dominican. I was born in New York, but I wasn't raised here. I spent some time in DR when I was a child, and then I lived in Massachusetts, and then I lived in Florida. A little bit about myself in the film. So yeah, I'm an interdisciplinary artist. I'm also a playwright, and the film was actually inspired by my one-woman show called What Happens to Brown Girls Who Never Learn How to Love Themselves Brown. And then it turned into the short film called The Ritual to Beauty, which centers me, my mother, and my grandmother and our relationship to relaxing our hair. It intersects spoken word and poetry. So there is some magic realism in this documentary, and I'm really grateful that it's here, and I'm grateful to be talking to these filmmakers today.
Cool. Thank you for that. Thank you, all of you, for the introductions. So the theme for every year, right? The LOLA Awards category has a theme. So this year, the theme is afrodescendencia. So the conversation that we want to have revolves around those elements in your films, right? Is what links them all together generally. But maybe just kind of going off your film, Shenny, we could talk to start with hair, because that's something, Christine, you mentioned as well. It resonated for you. But hair obviously being very, it can be very controversial, affirming, within, when it comes to identity. So if I just kind of leave it up there for you.
Yeah, so I guess I can just start by saying that when I had done the one woman show, one of the feedback sessions that I had with a mentor of mine, he was like, your show isn't just about hair, because at the time the show was about growing up with my mom relaxing my hair and only knowing that as my understanding of beauty, and my relationship to self-love was through that. And so when he saw the piece, he was like, you need to go deeper, and then in the process of creating the short film, I ended up cutting off all my hair. And I realized that my relationship to Blackness goes so much more beyond that. But I think for Afro-Latinx folks, at the surface, it does start with your relationship with hair, because I think that right there at the root is where we've denied Blackness for a lot of us. So that's what I can share to start.
Christine, did you want to talk a little bit about what you mentioned earlier?
Yeah, the film really resonated with me because well, I didn't always have curly hair. Like when I was younger, I think it's through puberty, my hair just exploded and became afro. And my mom is white, so she would bring me to white hairdressers. And one time this hairdresser blow dried my hair and it was just huge, which is beautiful. But I was like, 12 or 13, and everybody who, I was surrounded by, white people, and they're just staring at me, and they might have thought it was nice, but as a 13-year-old, I started crying. I was so self-conscious. And it was the thing about the ritual to beauty is that I didn't grow up seeing myself on TV or film, very rarely. I think the one time I saw that film was in Scarface with Gina. I guess she's Cuban, but she had I left the movie theater, oh my God, she looks like Gina because of my hair. So that's the one time, So yeah, so I think a lot of Blackness does start with our hair. And yeah, it does go deeper because it's also part of the community you grew up with. The foods, the music, your relatives. But that was when I did Fuego. There's one of the Manolo has a daughter, and she's having her quinceañera. And so for the film, the mom asked, should we straighten her hair? And I was like, no, we're not. The whole point of this is about, Afro-Latinidad, the Afro Latinx representation. So I wanted her to leave her hair curly. That was really important to me. And I think there's other elements in the film Fuego that you see that weave through the other films as well. The hair, but also some of the spirituality, like references to Yemaya. So in Fuego, it's a bit more subtle, but at the end of the film, Manolo is going back into his culture to get back his self-esteem. So part of it is the Afro-Cuban music, but then also he starts building his little altar in his apartment, and so you see the beginnings of that with his beads representing Shango. So I wanted to touch a little bit about that. And then there's the magical realism. There's like a dream sequence where Manolo's starting to feel better, and he was able to help his daughter to get the dress of her dreams. So he kind of has a little vision of himself dancing with her, which of course isn't happening because he's in Montreal and she's in Cuba. so I think it's interesting that we have a lot of common themes in our films, even though we're from all very different places. And while the film is based, the character is Afro-Cubano, I think there's themes that are also that resonate with any Afro-Caribbean person or even Indo-Caribbean person, their journey of leaving, whether it's Trinidad, Jamaica, or, the DR, and coming to a place where, you're uprooted and your culture, especially in Montreal, because we don't have as many of our members of our community here as you would have like in New York, right? In Brooklyn and Queens or other parts of the States. When we come up here, we're very isolated. One from the, so that's why we end up having a lot of people like Trinis and Jamaican, everybody hanging together to make our community, and now more and more like Afro-Latinos. Because, we're very isolated, and that's what Manolo is going through in the film. So it is Afro-Latinx, but it's also Afro-Caribbean. Like it could be a Trini, it could be a Jamaican person as well. And that's the intersection that we have a lot of shared experiences, also Haitian and people coming from Africa now. So, and it's a overlapping experiences of the African diaspora.
I was muted. Monica, did you want to add anything to that, or with regard to your own film?
I think hair, like you said, hair is in all of our projects in a very special way. One of Ciguapa's defining characteristics is the long, beautiful, thick hair that's covering their bodies. And that's kind of the hair I always wished I had as a kid. So it was kind of cool to put that on some people, and all the actresses with the wigs, they're like, ooh, look, like they're all like, wow, this is so nice with the long hair. And so that was really fun. And I am always, same as you were saying as a kid, it's when you grow up with mostly white people, like I also did, they just don't understand, and maybe they don't mean it. I'm sure some of them do, but maybe don't all of them mean it to be negative, but just the looks and the it is a lot when you're a kid. And that is also the background of my lead character, Milagro. She's adopted in the short, surrounded mostly by white people that just don't get what she looks like, what she's about. And she has that really long hair as well. And the actress, she was wearing a wig, but her hair looks a lot like all three of ours without the wig on. So also beautiful, with or without the wig. And it was just, she was having fun wearing it. And it was cool to have hair be such a big part of the story and the costumes, because we used the hair to cover their bodies. So even though it looks like one solid piece, it's actually a lot of little pieces glued to them and kind of came around like a weird vest almost to try to cover their bodies. So working with hair as a aesthetic, but also as wardrobe was interesting and like a good learning experience.
Cool, thank you. So I think from that, I kind of want to come back to you with a question on, I guess like a theme I see in La Ciguapa, right? Which is like affirmation, right? Like getting to that final part of the, that ending with finding community and also just not being believed, right? Like that doubt that the boyfriend puts, on her. So I just wonder if you could talk about that, and then sort of with all of your films, kind of the sense of affirmation, whether it's through culture or hair or intergenerational sort of, dialogue. But yeah, just starting with you on La Ciguapa would be cool.
Yeah, thank you for picking up on that. Being affirmed in who you are is definitely a big theme for this film. Sorry, my cat is playing with something. I don't know if you could hear that. But for me, again, like growing up, I was always confused about where I fit in. I'm not adopted, but just the varying cultures, one culture being Asian, one culture being Dominican, Caribbean, Black, and then also growing up with almost all white people. It's just like, who am I and where do I fit? And that's been kind of a theme of a lot of my work, just because that's what I'm trying to figure out about myself. So it was very natural for the lead to be dealing with the same things of who am I, where do I fit in? Even the person I'm with who's supposed to love me doesn't understand or is even trying very hard to understand. That's something else I've experienced. So at the end, when she meets all these women who look just like her and we're waiting for her and we're calling her, it's that moment of, oh, like this is her family, this is where she belongs. And you know, maybe in real life it's not always such a literal here we all are, you know, like we're in the woods, but I do think you can find your own communities and you can create your own communities and you can seek people out who have similar life experiences and bond that way. So it was very kind of like liberating for me to be like, oh look, like, you know, we made this story where someone figures out where they're supposed to be, and maybe some people see that as a monster, but people in the community know what it's really about. So that's kind of like the idea, and it's been really fun seeing people respond to that and being like, I was rooting for her, I was so glad when she found them. So it's been really fun.
Christine, do you want to follow up that?
Sure. I think in terms of a sense of affirmation, one of the things that drove me to focus on an immigrant story is just the current climate towards immigration in Quebec. It's a big issue in my province. And also there's a lot of commentary from leading politicians about the kinds of immigrants that they would like to have. Well, they tend to not, you know, they like European immigrants. That's what they said. So, you know what that means. So it was really important for me to show a character, and why I chose Afro-Cuban is because I wanted the music to be a metaphor for the potential of the person. So, you know, like Manolo, you see him like he's a janitor and you're like, you know, well, people might judge, or in fact, he is judged in the film. But then all of a sudden you see him singing and he's like this amazing performer. And the artist who wrote the song is from Cuba. He lives in Canada now. He's been here for many, many years. Giovanni Arteaga Valdez. And so he wrote this song that's so beautiful about overcoming your struggles. Cambia porque se te va la vida. And so really like a song of hope, a song of, people leave their country of origin to help their family back home. So that sense of, Manolo is doing this for his family that's still back in Cuba. And so there's that sense of affirmation, like he's so much more than what he looks on the surface. And then, so I feel like, people come to Quebec and they offer so much to the society. And one of the things is these Afro-Cuban musicians who live in Montreal, and they bring the music and the culture, and people love it and soak it up. So at the same time, I wanted to kind of show the story behind that it's not all fun, it's not all smiles, that there is a struggle there for people who are new to this country. And finally, I wanted to have representation. So it was great to have like Danny, the actor who plays Manolo. He's a great actor, lots of experience, and he's a great singer. So he's the ideal person to perform, to play the character of Manolo, although he's more Afro-Colombian. He's not, although his dad was born in Cuba, but anyway, so it's complicated, but he's more Afro-Colombian than Afro-Cubano. But we got Giovanni, and then he brought in Cuban musicians to perform in the film. He had Cuban musicians who performed in the recording of the song. So it's like also recognition for them to be seen, to be seen in Montreal as a community that's there, that's thriving, and that people may not often think about, you know?
No, for sure. I think it's just that conversation between assimilation, right, versus a process that lets somebody really bring their full selves, where we tend to, you know, really cut that, like break with the past, right? And you're American or you're Canadian, you just sort of adopt whatever the sort of local flavor is. But yeah, just going back to, you know, affirmation and Shenny in your film, right? Just the way you dialogue, right, with different generations. And it feels like you get to a place where people understand, you know, why decisions are made, right? Like why, you know, something gets passed down. So I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about that in your film.
I guess what I can say is in the process, I learned, I think what was affirmed for me was the power of forgiveness and the understanding that sometimes the women that came before you, although they may pass down something that can be deemed as a generational curse, I know for me, my mother and my grandmother survived to give me this freedom, to give me this sense of liberation. And there was one moment where my mom just I mean, everything was organic, it's a documentary, but there was something that she said that did take me by surprise that is in the film. And she says, it's too late for me, but thank God my daughter found it early. And I think in that, what I can affirm or honor in that moment is that my mom is a representation of a lot of mothers who may be seeing their young children and, you know, walking around with afros, like maybe they don't quite feel that they're ready or prepared or able to embody it. But the fact that we're doing it and claiming our Blackness and celebrating that and finding our joy in that, there is something that even if my mom can't apply it to herself, like she feels the freedom in me. And so I think that just is what I can say as far as like affirmation and speaking on like what gets passed down to us.
And so I did want to pick up on something. I think Monica, you started to kind of mention a little bit about how the film's received, right? Like when people see, you know, like the reaction to, you know, to the main character being represented in all of these women in the woods. So I was just wondering, you know, generally if you know, if y'all have showed your films in different audiences, like what are the kinds of reactions you've had? I guess Monica, we can start with you if you want.
Yeah, it's been so fun. The few chances I've had to see it in the theater with other people is always so amazing. There's a part where the boyfriend, he says a line, something like, you're being jealous, you sound crazy. He says something like that. And it's been building at that point. So that's like the top of the mountain of like, oh no, this guy's the worst. That's like when he finally like commits to being the worst. And every time he says that, somebody in the room goes, oh no, like somebody like reacts to him being the worst. And like, I love it. I'm like, oh good, like it's obvious that this is wrong. And you know, people have it's usually a woman too. It's usually a woman's voice who's like, no, which is funny. And then when she starts to change and like the transformation starts, every once in a while there's like a scream or something, which is great because it is a horror movie. So, you know, we're trying to scare people a little bit. There's also been a few times when she's killing him and she drops him. There has been applause, like where people are like, yes. Like, oh my gosh, like, wow, this is a morbid group in here. Everybody's excited about this. And then that's like literally in the theater while it's happening, but I've had a lot of responses later on of just people really loving that last scene and seeing her with a lot of other women. It's like, oh, I felt like it was me and my family up there, or me and my sisters. And people have really responded really well to that, of the just the visual of all of these beautiful women together. So that, you know, that makes me feel nice. The beauty parts, but also like the scary parts, you know, like, okay, good. It's scaring people where it's supposed to scare people.
Yeah, I did not mind when his, you know, head explodes. But Shenny, I kind of like the same question, right? About just feedback, but also since, you know, it's a documentary and you have subjects in it too, that I'm guessing you've shown them the film, like what their reaction has been as well. So you kind of talk about those two different.
Sure. I had the opportunity to actually show it at Miss Rizzo's salon. And if y'all don't know, it's a Dominican-owned salon in the Heights. So it was really dope to be around all these beautiful Dominican women and just like experience that with them. It was very emotional. People talked afterwards, like everybody shared a memory between themselves and their relationship with their mom. And I think the biggest thing echoed back to me is, again, like survival. Like we've all had to survive our mothers. And in the process, I realized like, oh, my mom had to survive her mother too, you know, and my grandma's amazing, respectfully. But these were things that just came up that whenever I show it to a group of people, like everyone connects, but it's different when I see Dominican women in particular watch the work, because like even down to like my grandmother's dialect, you know, like that is not something you see on TV, not even on Univision or Telemundo, you know, like she has a very specific way of speaking. And it's just nice to see that representation, and you see it when they watch and all, like that's me, you know. As far as like my mom and my grandma, I wish I could say something poetic, but they were kind of not numb to watching it, but almost like, yeah, there's just something about, I could never really, yeah, like I've always made work to impress my mom or show her what lives like within me. And it just like, there's something there, and I'm cool with that, because I think that's why I create. So they didn't really have the reaction that I wanted, but I think there's just, it was too real. So I'm moved by that. Yeah.
They always have that poker face, like you'll just never know. But like they'll talk to one of your cousins or something, be like, oh my gosh, you made the best film. It's so good. You have to watch it. And it's just like, it comes back to you secondhand. So I hope that's the case. But yeah, no one brings you back down to like do better than your parents or your relatives. So
right.
Kidding aside, Christine, do you want to, same question, just in terms of and I guess also, you know, maybe because you incorporated, you know, musicians and people who would, you know, who see themselves in the film from maybe a community that's not always highlighted, be interested to hear about that.
Well, we had a bit of a challenge. Well, COVID's been a big challenge in terms of watching the movie with audiences. So I've only seen it, it's only been in theaters twice. It's been in festivals, virtual. And so it's only been in theaters, in the actual theater twice. So now it's hitting more theaters as COVID restrictions get pulled back. But what I can say is that when like for example, when Danny, Giovanni, and I saw the movie at a showing of the Black Ink movies, all the movies together from the mentorship program that I was in, it was just pure joy, and we started singing the song along with the movie, and it's just, I don't know, I think we just really believe in that song, and believe in we just love the song so much, and how it represents the story of the film. I know I saw the band, certain people who were involved with the song performed live, and that was really special too. But again, because of COVID restrictions, we weren't allowed to dance. We had to stay in our seats. So I wish I had more exciting stories to tell you about that, but the film is such a joyous, it ends on such a joyous note, and it's almost like you want everybody to stand up and start dancing. But again, we're facing like a tough situation in the last few years. But one of the things that has come out, like when I did see it with people that were not related to me in any way in San Diego, was the villain in the film. There's a kind of Manolo does like a mic drop scene where, he kind of shows up this guy who's bossing him around, and the people really like enjoy that moment, because we've all been there, people of color being made to feel like, you know, we're not as smart, or, you know, and then when Manolo's able to show up this guy, it's kind of rewarding for everybody in the audience. And from just people who've watched the film online, I think people have been really surprised, because it's my first film. They were really surprised by the quality of the film. And I think because of what the story was, it brought a lot of people who wanted to see the representation and who were eager to work on the film. We had one Cuban Canadian, he drove like 2 hours. He doesn't even live in Montreal. He lives outside a small city outside of Montreal, like 2 hours, or like maybe an hour and a half away. And he drove all the way to Montreal to be in this movie. The man who plays the Tress, Lázaro Leiva. So, you know, so there was a real excitement for them. And we filmed it during COVID too. We had to wear masks, and there was a lot of heightened fear back then in 2020 when we filmed it. But people just really gravitated to the story and understood what the mission was, like what they were doing, and they really wanted to represent. And the only unfortunate part for me is that this film didn't get any funding. So, you know, people were working people were not earning the money that they should to make the film. So it's a labor of love for me, for the, you know, for Giovanni, especially the composer, and for the band members. It really was a labor of love for them, and they were so excited to be to participate and make this film. So one of the things I'm going to do is Giovanni wants to release the song as a song, and so I want to take footage from the film and make a music video, so that, you know, people could just enjoy the song, and I don't know, we could keep celebrating the film for as long as we can, you know.
That's cool. So I want to do two things. Like, one, I want to ask like about production, because you mentioned COVID being an obstacle. So just kind of generally, like, what production was like for each of you. And then in the meantime, if you want to, I was wondering if there were any questions you had for each other, you know, especially if you had a chance to see films, or just, you know, based on what we talked about, anything. But before that, just production, if anybody wants to start. Maybe Christine, because you mentioned it already. So
well, yeah, we filmed it in the summer. It was really hot, and everybody wore masks as much as possible. It was a different time. People were very, very committed to following the rules. But, you know, at the same time, we took chances, being a whole bunch of us in one room, filming. We had a COVID scare on set where DOP was sick at the end of the day. And so we had to cancel the next days of shooting until she was able to get like a, you know, PCR test. Back then we didn't have the quick rapid test. So yeah, I was dealing with a lot of those issues. And generally, just people, aside from COVID, is just people working really hard on something. Like I said, we didn't have any funding to produce the film. And so a lot of it was out of my pocket, but you know, people, so you know, it's a lot what we have to go through in terms of people of color, Black, Latino, Latinx, creating, and often not getting a lot, you know, the financial support, and also you know, not getting noticed by by broader communities. But you know, at the end of the day, for me, for all of us, I think we did the film for us, for our people. And so the greatest thing for me is that to be part of a festival like PHLAFF, you know, and other festivals, Black film festivals, Latino film festivals, because it's about us, it's for us. And so I'm really, really happy to, I can't believe sometimes what we went through filming through COVID, but we did it. And, you know, it's something that it's rather than have a bad memory, well, there are some, but we have this amazing accomplishment. And that's really exciting. So there'll be, you know, the COVID negative, but wow, we did a short film, and it's not just me, but it's all the people who were in the program and who completed their films in a really difficult time. So it was really exciting for us to be able to do that.
Cool. Shenny, do you want to go next?
It was honestly very easeful. You know, Maria and I would wake up at 3 a.m, go to the beach, like film as the sun would rise, come back, talk shit with my grandma, talk shit with my mom, have some moments where we would think of something poetic to do, eat, talk more. Like it was just two friends who grew up together and made something as vessels of God. And we were just very connected and joyful. And yeah, 2020, I'm very grateful to say that it was actually a very blessed year for me as far as just doing what I love and not worried about anything else and really connected to family. So my process production wise was like a dream, you know, so, and I'm really grateful for that.
No, that's good. Yeah, I'm glad to hear that. I think that definitely shines through. I mean, it's corny. I don't know if it sounds corny, but it's true. Like you feel, you know, everything kind of came together. So, Monica, do you want to talk a little bit about your production?
Yeah, it was chaotic, and I don't remember a lot of it. But we shot the film in 2 days overnight because the whole thing is, you know, takes place at night. We were at this big ranch in Santa Clarita. And this is the biggest crew I've ever had. There are probably 30 people on the crew. And we did have funding from Netflix and LOLA, which was incredible. The film would not exist without that at all. But it was not a huge amount of money. So we were still so many people working for free, pulling favors from friends to get gear at very discounted rates. You know, our cinematographer, she worked for free, and she used her own personal contacts to get a lot of gear. You know, she was like using her personal favors for this project, which I was very grateful for her to do that because I didn't know her that well at the time. And we had to have a COVID compliance officer because it was in the depths of COVID. And luckily, since this film was set outside, that was a big advantage. So, you know, people still have to wear masks, but when you shoot inside, the regulations like quadruple of what you have to do. So at least we were outside, but I have a friend who's a COVID compliance officer for a film, and she donated her time, you know, to be the COVID person, and a lot of friends that I now owe favors to it in return. But it was really cool to, you know, like we had a moment, we were like, oh my God, like, look at this set. Like, we had this giant balloon to imitate the moon that like was hovering above all the trees, like, cause it's a giant helium thing. And like seeing that was like, this is cool. Like, you know, we're making a movie, even though it was freezing. It was like 40 degrees both nights. And a lot of the girls are nude or implied nude, you know, so they would like all be huddling in their coats, and then they would throw them off, and we would grab the coats, shoot, bring the coats back so they could put them on, take them off, like, you know, a lot of people running around trying to keep people warm. And we also had a lot of VFX as well. So the whole first half of the first day was just a green screen and a treadmill, and all the girls would get on and just walk, or they would pose in different positions, and then we would cut their legs at the knee in post and flip them back for where they were standing. And we were in the edit, and I realized like, oh, we don't really have that juicy close-up of her face, like of her mouth, you know, because we kind of ran out of time. So we shot in a friend's living room, and we dressed the walls with green clothing. Out of focus, it kind of looks like leaves. So anytime you're like this close to her face, we're in someone's house. And we had to do it on a different day. And I'm always like, that's a flannel and that's a pair of shorts. And like, it's not real. So some of that stuff of like ingenuity of my friends and all of us coming together of like, okay, well, here's a problem. How can we solve it? And like the willingness of everyone to just get in there and do their best for no money is very, very appreciative. Like the actress Cheyenne, who plays Milagro, that girl is an angel. We really put her through it with that. She had to sprint on the treadmill with the wig, implied nude, and we had to do it over and over and over again because it was hard for her to get enough speed to look like she was really running. So, you know, she would sprint on this thing, and then we'd cut and she'd take a breath and she'd do it again. And she had to sprint through the actual woods barefoot and all these very physically demanding things from her. So sometimes when I think about all the different elements, I'm like, how does this exist? How did we do this in just two and a half days? But it is because people believing in a project and everybody, you know, putting their all into it when they're not getting much back monetarily. So I think that's the key, is like people believing in a project and being willing to donate their time.
Hello. Welcome. I guess if you want to introduce yourself, that would be great. And then I guess you could talk a little longer about your film just to sort of catch you up.
Hello, everyone. I'm so sorry that I'm a little late. I'm actually in New York City right now, but I live in Los Angeles. My name is Loren Escandon, she, her. I identified, wow, that's a whole other conversation. I guess I'll identify by the self-imposed idea of Afro-Latina, but I will say that I'm a Black Colombian if I am not in the States. And I'm from Colombia. And about my film, it's called Los Patines, and it's a story about my mother's childhood as a domestic slave back in Colombia. So my mother was born and abandoned as a toddler, and she grew up under the abuse of Colombian white, what we call Criollo family. And she was always the maid. But she never got paid. So that's pretty much a slavery in modern days and past days and throughout history. So I guess that knowing that story from the beginning for me was kind of very normal, and it was something that we will talk about. But when I moved to America and like the whole idea of slavery was kind of like washed out in so many ways, I thought like, well, I have this encounter that is like firsthand, right? Like I know this story. It belongs to me, to my family, to my ancestors. So I'm just gonna try to tell a story about that, and that is Los Patines. And I decided to tell it from the point of view of a child because it just makes it a little bit less tragic in a way, because it's her point of view, and from her point of view, that's not who she is. And at the same time, it gives, I want to give people that watch it this idea that it is a cycle that can be broken if you are aware enough. So that's my film.
Okay, thank you for that. I just want to come back to you real quick. Just because one of the questions that came up, you know, like the LOLA Awards category, right? This year, the theme is afrodescendencia. So, you know, in your film and the way you identify as a Black Colombian and telling that story within Colombia, you know, I know if you could talk about those elements, right? Those racial elements within your film, and then maybe broader in Colombian society, or just, you know, however you want to frame that. But if you want to talk about that, that would be cool.
Of course, I feel like the history of Afro-Colombians is as complicated as any other country outside of the African diaspora, pretty much. Growing up biracial like myself, my father was Criollo white and my mother was Black African. I grew up, I guess, with a very an unconscious awareness of my darkness. I saw how my mom was treated very differently than my father within the society. And Colombia is as racist as any other country can be. We really, as a society, we think that we are Spaniards and that we're whites, when actually the numbers are very even, and the indigenous people was just massacred like any other country that was conquered by the colonialism, right? And I feel like in a way in Colombia, the Afro descents and the Black people, we call ourselves Black only, the Black people are just now awakening to the idea that they have to claim their space in society. So we are very behind compared to the awareness of Black Americans, let's put it that way. Which is fascinating too, because since I'm very immersed in the American culture, I can see how behind we are in Colombia with our own process, which is extremely painful. And that's one of the reasons I have decided, not just as an actress, but as a filmmaker, to start telling the stories of Black Latinas specifically, because in a way, society has not just denied us a space, but it's like we do not exist. Right? We do not exist in storytelling, in TV or film. In Colombian movies, one of my dearest friends is like the first Black woman to be the lead of a telenovela, and that happens 4 years ago. So I feel like we need to start ourselves as Black, claiming our space and telling our own stories and kind of forcing our way around, because they're not going to give it to us.
Yeah, I think that, you know, like every country having different processes, I think there's some things like the census, right, being like a big deal in different countries. I know Colombia just did that not too long ago, Peru before that, Mexico, political representation, like Francia, Marquez is, you know, literally changing like what politics looks like at the national level. So that's cool. So I want to do two things. One, Shenny, if you have to go, I kind of wanted to give you like final, like last word, basically, to add anything that that we might have missed or that you want to say. And then if anyone, if people want to just stay on for a little longer, you know, I can ask a few more questions. Loren, I can sort of pull you into the conversation, maybe go back a little bit to where we were discussing earlier. So if that sounds okay. Like Shenny, you want to do your kind of sign off for?
Okay, sure. I mean, there isn't really anything more I can say about the film. What I can say is I have a lot of gratitude to being here. I have a lot of gratitude to being with these filmmakers and seeing everybody's work and just hearing y'all talk about it and talking about the purpose and the intention and the, okay, sure, of course, Monica. And the intention that you have. And, you know, Loren, when you came in, just like that energy was so specific and strong, like you brought your ancestors into the Zoom right now. And it just really humbled me because I'm really tired. So if there's anything I can leave with is that I'm just grateful to be in this space right now, because that in itself is the affirmation to keep going. And I feel like my question for the other artists, and maybe we can just stay in contact via email, is how are folks sustaining themselves? So I feel like I've kind of been in a season right now where I feel myself kind of giving up. And so anytime I have like moments like this, they're really gentle reminders to keep going. But that sustainability I've been thinking about as an artist, how to keep going in hard times. And yes, I'm happy to answer your question, Monica.
Yeah, I mean, your film is so beautiful and something I haven't really seen before, in that it is a documentary, but it's also very experimental and poetic. And I feel like those things tend to stay separate. So I love seeing them combined. But I wanted to ask about the nature imagery, because you have the beach, which is beautiful. I was like, that has to be sunrise. And then you said it was sunrise. And then also you have like the woods and the green. And that does feel like, to me, like it does connect back to hair in a way. So I wanted to ask about like those choices and yeah, how it like feeds into the overall story.
Yeah, so at that time, I was newly being introduced to a spiritual practice that I know by the name of Lukumi. There are other names, you know, but to that culture, it is disrespectful. But, you know, like it's sort of a branch of the Yoruba religion, voodoo, hoodoo, you know, things of that nature. And God and all the orishas and the deities, they're expressed through nature. You know, we know ourselves through it. So that's really what it was a calling to, especially with the water and like the voice that you hear. She's supposed to represent the voice of Yemaya, but I didn't want to do anything so direct. It was one of those things of like, if you know, or if you feel that calling, if it's coming close, then there it is. It's just like an ode of like, I'm grateful to my ancestors to have found me in this way and that I've arrived here. And yeah, like sometimes the trees would look like my hair and things of that nature. So they're all sort of tied together in a way. So yeah, that's where that came from, more of like the spiritual part of my relationship to healing.
Cool. So I guess, Loren, to kind of bring into the conversation, one of the things that we talked about after was just kind of this idea of affirmation in each of the films. I think in Los Patines, it's interesting that the affirmation is kind of like comes at a loss of faith. You know, there's like asking El Niño Jesus, right? Like, you know, please help me. And at that point where it's just like, you know, it's me, right? I got me. I have to take the situation in my hands and make something out of it. So I was wondering if you could talk about that affirmation in your film, and I guess how you see it for your mother, or more generally for the topic, you know, that you're approaching.
I think that that's one of those elements that it kind of combines my own perspective and my mother's. I think that when I was growing up and listening to the devastation that my mom had to go through when she was a child, I was always questioning, like, because she was very religious, very Catholic, as a good Colombian, because I was always questioning, like, how can you have so much faith when it seems like life was just taken away from you, like when life was not giving you anything in exchange for that faith, right? Because that's the way that Catholics we grow up. It's like you do good and you get good, and if you're bad, you're a sinner, and then you will be in bad shape. But with my mother, it was her faith was always intact, and that was something that I always admired very much. But at the same time, it got to a point that that she actually very later in life questioned the fact that God maybe wasn't what she thought he was. And I wanted to include that in the film, like that discussion that she had at a soul level of her faith. And I wanted to introduce it in her childhood, because at the same time, when you're a child, you question yourself in a more unique and natural way. And I thought that would make sense more when she was a child. But at the same time, it was the idea of, like, after so much suffering, it gets to a point that you really have to understand that the way that God is helping you is by allowing you to take certain decisions. Let's put it that way, right? So it's exactly what you said, is her taking matters into her own hands is her way, is the way God is showing her the way. The way is not writing letters, that the way is not praying for it, the way is do something about your life and take a decision and go for it. So I think that yeah, that was something that I wanted to explore with the story. That was kind of my own battle and my mother's battle in different times of our lives, but that I wanted to kind of embrace into the structure of the story.
Always like muted when I start, sorry. No, I thank you for sharing that. I think I had asked earlier if and so Monica kind of asked that question to Shenny, but if you had questions for each other, if you had a chance to see the films, or just in general, if you have any like sort of filmmaker question.
Well, I have to say, I apologize because as I said, I'm in New York for an event. So this is like taking all over my life. And this was the last minute. So I didn't have the chance to watch them, but I put time aside to watch it before tomorrow when life goes very complicated. But I feel like my question in general for female Black women, strong women, is always like, how do you find the motivation to tell the stories that you tell? Like, where do you find them? Because it was interesting with Janine, she was saying like, well, if you understand, you understand, right? Which is lovely, because at the same time, it's like other artists that are not Black are not trying to explain what they're trying to say. They're just saying it, right? But I feel like her sometimes, I'm like, oh, do I need to figure which is the metaphor? Is everybody gonna get it? Is this offensive? Like, for example, language, right? That's like a whole conversation I had to have with my editor, who was very uncomfortable with me using the word in the subtitles, nigger. And she was highly uncomfortable. And I was like, my story is not to make anybody comfortable. That's not my job. If you're uncomfortable, check yourselves. But we're always like trying to please. And I just wonder where do you find the inspiration? What stories do you want to tell? And how you avoid that need of pleasing people with your stories?
I feel like for me, everything you said is so true, by the way. Like, if it makes you uncomfortable, you need to look at your own self, because there's a reason that you feel uncomfortable. So examine that. But I feel like for me, I mostly work in the horror genre. So most of what I do is coming from a place of fear. And there are like, I think there's like 3 or 4 core causes of fear. It's like loss of life or bodily harm, being othered, fear of the unknown, so like xenophobia, and fear of loss of life is in all horror things, because that's like the end result if like everything goes really bad. But I tend to sit in the fear of the unknown place. And I think for me, that's a really good way to show people what I'm trying to say, but wrapping it up in kind of a fun package. So like, if you can't, if your mind can't process the deeper layers of what I'm trying to say, whoa, look, that's really scary, so you can, there's something, a lighter level of entertainment to kind of hold what I'm really trying to say, which is like, no, but look how bad she's being treated. And, she doesn't know who she is, and like trying to figure out where you belong. Like, that's what I'm really saying. And I feel like most of my work does sit there of like, I have something I'm trying to say about myself and my own experiences, and usually from a racial perspective, but I'm also just throwing out some fun, scary moments. And kind of how Shenny was saying, like, it if you know it, if you don't, you're not going to get it. And I think that's kind of the same thing too.
Yeah, Christine, if you want to.
Oh yeah. So I get my inspiration from just everything that surrounded me my whole life. So the way I grew up, or people that I meet, artists. I get inspired a lot too by artists that I meet, and I'll think of a new film idea, and then I'm like, oh, I know this artist who could play this character. She'd be perfect for it. So it's a little bit of mix of what's around me and a fictional story, and how I can marry people, that artists I know, into my imaginary world. And so I'm really influenced a lot by like the African diaspora in general. Like I said, in Montreal, there's so many of us from different backgrounds. So, it's like, Afro-Latinx or Black is not just one identity, because you could be, Black and Colombian, you could be Black and Cuban, or you could be Black from Trinidad or African American. So there's no like one identity. So my world is so multicultural and diverse, with my dad coming from Trinidad. Like Monica, I have cousins. I have so many like cousins who are half Black, half Indian, because Trinidad is like, it's two big groups who have shaped the island's culture and history. And some of them are like, originally, so I was from Catholics, so they were Muslim, the Indian uncles I had. And so it's like a whole mix of, and then my life in Canada is also very mixed with all the people from different communities and different islands and different languages. So I'm really inspired by that, and also always looking at it from an Afro-descended lens. And a lot of people will question, actually will question my identity. Like they'll just, are you Latina? And what drives me nuts is the things that make me look Latina is the African parts of me, right? Because we're the curly hair, the lips, the nose, like that's Afro, like it's, so, so it's, for me, I have a lot of, I face a lot of issues, like, and so instead of like saying anything to people, I don't get mad, I just write about it. So, like when I might watch a movie someday and be like, but it's, so yeah, it fuels a lot of my writing, the search for identity, and just exploring all facets of the people, my family and my history, and continuing to step away from the colonial education and putting value on the culture of where I come from. So a lot of the things of the African culture, by even by Black elites, for example, the carnival, the drums, and the bacchanal, this was looked down upon. You were lower class, and now I'm like, no, wait, that's our culture. Why is it lower class? So it's a lot of also retomar la cultura de mis antepasados. And so I'm also learning Spanish just to delving into like Latin American culture and history as well. So that's a lot of what feeds my work. And I'm inspired all the time, because the more you learn, the more angry you get, right? And it's like, oh my, like, your story, Monica, is just like, Loren is just shocking, right? But so we have to highlight, we have to talk about it, because if we don't, nobody else is going to do it. I mean, people are fighting back against critical race theory, and it's like, that's the truth, it's history, it happened. So we have to really, as artists, I think, use our voice to tell our stories and to let people know what's going on, and what we've been through, but where we're going to also. So sometimes it can be really positive, like Manolo's journey, where he's going to move forward, and he's not going to let people keep holding him down.
At the same time, I think that is fascinating, the battle that we have within ourselves, right? Like the racism and the colorism that we Black Afro descents go through is just fascinating to me as well. I remember when I was a kid, I always wanted to identify as a Black person. So people will call me and I will say, yes, I'm negra, right? And people will jump right away. No, you're not negra, you're café con leche. And I'm like, oh, so it's better for me to say that I'm a latte than to say that I'm Black, right? Because that makes them feel better about my presence. And the amount of people, dark-skinned Black Colombians, that will say that to me was just outstanding. Because for them, it was almost like, don't say that you are as bad as me. Say that you're better because you're Mexican. It's like, why, how crazy it is, the fact that the society has convinced us that we're so low in the structure that we don't want to recognize who we are. Right? To me, that is absolutely fascinating, because it's almost not just fighting, and fighting usually has a negative connotation, but I think that is a battle that we're fighting. And the fact that we're fighting not just other people that see a certain way, but the idea that we have thought that we can see ourselves that way, the way that has been imposed to us, right? So that's fascinating. That's why I love the fact that, Christine, you have all this melting pot in your house and all these influences, because that must inform your stories, not just so much, but it must give you so many stories to tell that we surely need.
Yeah, it does, you know, it's yeah, and every day is a journey. Yeah, no, it's, and it also, yeah, no, it's I do have a lot of stories and lots of experience. Also being, you know, multilingual, being able to talk to different people and learn different experiences. So my next film is like, it's like about, you know, it's about the time of COVID, and it's with a senior citizens, and how, you know, people have thought that seniors are dispensable, and during the time of COVID, like, we'd rather not have masks and be free, and, you know, so what if some people die? So I have, you know, so that, you know, was a topic that really bothered me. So I'm responding with, I have a new short script that I'm working on, and so I'm responding with that. And I have a senior, an actor and singer who's amazing. She still works, she still sings. She's got grandkids, and she's going to be performing at the Montreal Jazz Festival. So she's not stopping. So, you know, so I wanted to kind of speak to that. So again, it's just, you know, I'm inspired by the people around me, and people who, you know, are so amazing and talented. And it just gives me like juice, like, just, you know, to keep writing new ideas. Because after Fuego, after I did finish Fuego, I spent a few months actually, and I don't know how you guys feel, but like, you do this huge project, and when it was finished, I thought that was it all. I was like, I went into a rut for 3 months, maybe like Shanice's feeling, and I was like, oh, like, I have nothing left in me. Like, what am I going to do next? But then all of a sudden, after I rested a little bit, like, I don't know, like, I just started, ideas just start popping into my head, and I started working on all kinds of projects. And so now I have, like, I don't know, 3-4 projects on the go, rewrites and applying for grants and getting, you know, pitching, and like, yeah. So I think sometimes it's also good if you're feeling down, to just walk away from the work and do a lot of self-care, go go on vacation, read a book, just do something that's not in the arts, and then it'll slowly build, you know, the fuel will start to rise up again, and you'll start to have to get back to creating.
I don't know, Kirsten, how you doing on time, if you're there, but we're recording. So I just wanted to kind of look toward like how everyone's doing on time, and see if there's any more questions for each other, or if we kind of want to move into like closing thoughts, or just, you know, if you want to talk about, you know, if you're doing anything else with this film. I know, Christine, right? You're gonna, it's a full screenplay now, right? So yeah.
It's still in development. I'm only on the second draft, but yeah, I have a feature version. I've got my concept deck, and just waiting for opportunities to start pitching.
So yeah, I don't know. It's just anything that you want to add, each of you, and then yeah, I guess Monica, if you want to talk about that and maybe what you're working on for the future.
Yeah, just like you said, Christine, I'm also working on the feature version. People were very excited to see a new monster that we haven't already seen 100 times. So there's been a lot of good response about, you know, working on the feature version, and some of the, bigger horror companies have been really interested, which is exciting. And I'm like, this is about time. I've been here, I've been here trying to get your attention. So I'm glad this is what did it. So yeah, writing a feature is a whole other beast. And so I'm in the beginning of that. And luckily I've found kind of a development team. So there's a couple of different people helping to pull the story out and help it make the most sense that it can. So that's kind of what I'm working on now. But at the same time, I'm also working on another horror short about my Sri Lankan heritage, mostly because my dad was like, what about me? When he saw the short, because it's about my mom's side. So there is a Sri Lankan demon from Sri Lankan folklore that now I'm working on making a short about that as well, and doing kind of like a father-daughter story where they have to like fight this demon together, as kind of for my dad. So that's kind of what I'm working on now. And it's been exciting to see how one or two projects can really change the whole trajectory of your career and your work. And the hardest part is getting the funds and resources to make it. And if you can get to that point and you can put it out, the response is, it helps you get to where you wanted to go. So the hardest part is like getting the resources to do it, because you can do it. It's just getting other people to believe in you, to give you money to do it. Because you're like, I know I can do it. I just need you to agree with me. So getting to that point it's been very nice to be like, okay, we're on the other side of that first big hurdle, and what's next. Yeah.
Loren, if you want same question.
Yes, well, it's interesting because a lot of people always, when they see Los Patines, they're like, can we see more? And Los Patines was very special in the sense that, so initially the structure was supposed to include my mom, and my mom was going to act in it. But my mom was very shy, and it was a whole process to convince her to do it. So by the time I actually did, COVID hit, and unfortunately my mother, she transitioned suddenly, and I didn't have the film. So I had to kind of like restructure, rewrite, re-edit, and try to give some sense to the material I had. And that's what it ended up to be, which is perfect in the sense that that's what was supposed to be. It wasn't what I had in mind. It wasn't what my dream was. It was this, right? But in that sense, like, I'm not willing to revisit that story anytime soon, because emotionally it's just not, I'm not there. So I decided that I'm working now on a short that I want to shoot in Colombia. And it's, as Monica is saying, like, finding the funds and all is very challenging. And I left Colombia many years ago, so I really don't know that many people. So that's another challenge that I am encompassing right now. But it is a film about my story as a biracial kid. It's supposed to be live action and animation, and it's called Gris. And it's about this first grader that needs to explain what color she is to a classmate that is bullying her. So that's pretty much the story. And I'm working now in developing a pilot called 40X, that is about 4 Latinx friends in their 40s going through life and life kind of crumbling around them in their 40s, when everybody's supposed to be perfect and beautiful, as we all know, because that's what life tells us, that that's the way it's going to work. So it's 4 Latinx friends, and one of the things that I really want to explore with that story is exactly what Christine was saying. It's like Latinx or Latine is this bag that has been created for pragmatic reasons in America, but we are not all the same. We don't sound the same. Our cultures are completely different. So I want to explore these 4 different cultures through these 4 women that happen to be friends in Los Angeles. And so those are the 2 projects that I'm working on as a filmmaker. I didn't go to film school, so for me, all of this is kind of like, Los Patines is like my first film, so I'm kind of learning the ways to create, to collaborate, and it's fascinating, and I really love it. So I really don't want to stop, but at the same time, I'm an actress, which is what I went to school for. So as an actress, I have a film coming up on Netflix at the end of July called Purple Hearts, where I play a really interesting character supporting, and I finally play a Colombian. Hello, which is the first time ever. Because I'm always playing Cuban and Puerto Rican and Dominican and all the ideas that people have of how I look like. So it's really endearing to finally be playing a Colombian. So I'm pretty excited about that. And nothing, keep telling stories. I guess that's the plan.
Cool. All right. So I think we're good. I just want to say thank you to everybody for taking the time. I hope you enjoyed the conversation.